Welcome to Confessions of a Parent Coach. I'm Coach, a mother of four, and potty talker, Ann Kaplan. This is the podcast where I confess something from my own parenting and coaching life, teach a lesson around it, and answer your questions. Even we parenting experts are far from perfect, and the real magic happens when we get down with all that imperfection. We get into the gritty side of parenting here, so earbud up and dive in.
Welcome into another episode of the podcast, everybody. I'm so excited to be back with you this week. Really enjoying this entry into 2025. And I hope you're feeling the same way in your own version of that. You know, doesn't necessarily have to be about getting all jazzed up over goals or resolutions or anything like that. But for me personally, even without all of that ambition or whatever, after taking such a long break of away from routine, away from work, away from the everyday, you come back to, or I come back to, real life with just this kind of renewed enjoyment. Um, so that is really exciting for me. It's so fun to just have a day where it's like, yes, I really got some stuff done. I'm kicking butt over here, ticking things off my to-do list, really moving back into routine and rhythm. And I just love the word rhythm when it comes to just life in general, like everything about life is so rhythmic. And we seem to forget that and strive for homogeneity, strive for monotony, honestly, when really that's not the way life works. And if we were able to just embrace the rhythm of life, like sometimes we're in a trough, sometimes we're in a peak, you know, and sometimes, that lull is what begets the next crest of the wave, seems like just so much more in tune with even our biorhythms, day and night, your heartbeat, you're breathing in, you're breathing out, like all of it is so rhythmic. There's nothing static. So us striving to I'm going to be the exact same weight my whole life, or I'm going to have the same routine all of the time, or this striving that we have for quote unquote work life balance for was a really great example, but there's so many other examples. All of it is just so um I don't know, it's almost like an unnatural. And I can't tell you how many sessions I have with clients who are really down on themselves because, maybe when we first started working together, we hit the ground running and it was amazing and all of that great stuff. And now things seem to have maybe hit a wall or a lull, or that breakneck speed didn't sustain throughout the whole time that we were working together. And a lot of our work is around that embracing of life's rhythms. And that's what I want to talk about today, actually. So my confession for you this week is really around that exact sort of pitfall that I just described, of really wanting things to be sort of even Steven, and feeling like when things are sort of up and down, it feels wrong. It felt wrong to me when I was a younger mother, for sure, and just a younger human who hadn't maybe done as much of my own personal growth work yet as I have today. And how I would parent when I felt like things were getting off kilter. So, think about maybe we're just getting off of this big winter break, right? Or like at the end of summer break, and you look around. I don't know if this happens to you, but it definitely happened to me, where I would look around and just be like, everything is off the rails. Like my kids are watching too much screens, they're going to bed too late. I don't even know what time of day, like what meal times are anymore. Half the time I don't even know when the last time they took a shower was or anything. Actually, that it literally just happened to me this last fall break that we just got finished with. I looked over at Sky and I was like, have you taken a shower since we got here 10 days ago? And he's like, no. I'm like, okay, well, before we get back in the car and drive 20 hours home from the holidays, you need to take your shower. But the difference now is that it's not alarming or upsetting or, dysregulating to me when things like that happen. But back in the day, absolutely. And what do? I accidentally, and I think a lot of parents do this, accidentally exacerbate this ebb and flow. Like instead of it just being this sort of natural rhythmic thing that happens throughout a year or through over time or whatever, I would be so overreactive and upset about this one end of the pendulum that we were at that I would like overcorrect and have us swinging wildly back in the other direction where it's like no screens. We are going to be on this like very rigid schedule. Everyone's going to bed exactly at 8:30, not 8:31, and just like over course correct. And now, instead of it being the natural rhythm and ebb and flow of life's vicissitudes, it is an extreme sort of anthropogenic, meaning I'm the one who is making it happen, an unnatural, extreme swinging from one end of the spectrum to the other. So if you find yourself like that, I really hope that this podcast episode is just very well timed for you all. These ideas of getting back into the swing of things. I mean, even the fact that we use that word, that expression exists, getting into the swing of things, not into the standing still of things. This time that we're in right now of like sort of coming out, it's after the solstice, days are getting longer, we're sort of coming out of the darkness into the light. And instead of careening into 2025 with this like extreme over the top ambition and all of this stuff, and accidentally overcorrecting for this chapter of sort of wintering and hibernation and rest and relaxation on structure and stuff like that, we could instead slip or ease our way back into this next upswing of our natural life's rhythm. And I really want to underscore, and I'm going to say this again, like just think about everything that exists in nature, everything that exists in life, everything that exists in your body, everything that exists even in our children's growth patterns and things like that. It is all rhythmic. It is all ebbs and flows and peaks and valleys. And wouldn't it just be great for us to be able to relax into that sensation? So, I'm going to talk about today is something that my clients learn about, maybe around month four when we're working together, give or take. I'm really not super rigid about that kind of stuff. It's really much more about just like parenting is about attuning to our kids and meeting them when they're at and all that stuff. Coaching is very, very similar. I have all these resources and we have a rough timeline of how things tend to go. But, if you wanted things to be rigidly sort of cookie cutter, you wouldn't hire a coach. You would just maybe read a book or take a done for you like self-paced course or something like that online. Coaching is much more about attuning to you, realizing where you're at and what needs to happen and what's your most pressing issue and what maybe is unnecessary and redundant. But in general, around month four, we talk about something called the cycle of growth. And I did not make this up. It's just something that I share with my clients. And if you work with me ever, you'll see that a lot of the resources I share with you, I would say most of the resources I share with you are either compilations of other resources or they're directly that external resource itself. One of my superpowers as an Ania type 1 is being able to take and synthesize tons and tons of chaotic information and data and put it all together in this one sort of cohesive big picture for you. And I can't tell you how many times a day even I have clients come to a session and say, I'm just going to have verbal diarrhea and then you're going to make sense of everything I tell you because that's what you always do. And I'm like, yep, that's why you hired me. I had a client one time many years ago say, she was writing a testimonial for me. And she was like, the great thing about working with Anne is you don't ever have to go out and buy a book or go to the library or Google stuff and search around for stuff. Like you can just trust that Anne is already synthesizing all of those resources and she's going to present you with the sort of take home message and everything, which I really appreciated. It felt really good. It just feels so good to have somebody see you the way that you feel you truly are and in your gifts that you feel you truly have and stuff like that. It feels so, you feel so seen and validated. So it was one of the most lovely testimonials I've ever gotten, which obviously here I am years later and I remember it so vividly. So let's talk about this cycle of growth. And like I said, I did not invent this at all. It's something that lots of different practitioners talk about it and use it. But what we look at in this cycle of growth, and as I'm describing this, I want you to think about like where you might be on various topics in your own cycle of growth. Think about where you might be able to identify your kids are in these, different echelons of the cycle of growth. And if you work with me, you get a workbook in the mail, and there's an image that my amazing graphic design sister made for me of this cycle of growth that really shows very visually this like up and down, ebb and flow, trough and peak and valley stuff that we're talking about. But so anyway, let's just think that you are starting out trying to learn a new skill or achieve a new goal or, accomplish something. And this is where most people start 2025 or the beginning of the year, New Year's resolutions and stuff like that in this mindset, which is called inception. It is that place where you are just so pumped, like you can kind of visualize the place that you're going to go, and you're so excited and pumped about how great your life is going to be once you've achieved that thing. So the example I always give is learning to drive a car. Like cast your memory back to when you were like 15-ish years old and you were going to learn how to drive a car. And at first, when we think about driving a car when we're that young, and obviously not everyone feels this way, but at least for me, I was so excited to be able to drive. Like it was going to be so much freedom for me. I was going to be able to hang out and socialize more without having to depend on my parents. And I was going to be able to be more autonomous in that, not just because I didn't have to depend on my parents, but because I could just make my own decisions and go where I wanted to without checking with them or asking them permission or telling them my life story or any of that stuff. So I could visualize clearly how awesome it was going to be a driver. Just all the stuff. I was going to be cool, I was going to everything. And I had a job at the time. I was going to be able to go to my job. I was going to be able to work more and make more money, like all the things. I couldn't wait. I could really see myself on the other side of this, you know, skill building being like a driver, and it was going to be amazing. So that was my feeling of inception. I was so excited, and I didn't know what I didn't know. I didn't know jack crap about driving a car. I didn't know how long it was going to take me to learn. I didn't know anything. All I knew was that it was exciting and I wanted to do it. And that phase of inception is kind of called um it's called inception because you're like kind of getting started and you're like putting yourself into that mindset, and you're like you're kind of like inserting yourself into this new process or whatever. And it's almost like this picture of you like jumping off a cliff because you're so excited to like soar, right? And when we talk about um, that phase of inception, we talk about it as being unconsciously incompetent, meaning I didn't know how to drive and I didn't even know what I didn't know about driving. I was totally unconscious of anything that was involved in driving, really. And I was completely incompetent at doing it because I hadn't learned yet. And I was even unconscious about my incompetence. Like I was unconscious about all the things that I needed to learn or how bad I was at things or what was involved in learning how to drive. I was just pumped up and unconsciously incompetent. And then I started taking driver's ed. And this is where you get into this next phase in the cycle of growth, which is called deception. where you feel like you were kind of deceived, like, oh, shoot, like this kind of sucks. It's going to take a long time. It's a lot of work. I'm not very good at it. I'm like really struggling. It's not very fun. I have to drive with an instructor. I have to drive with my parents in the car. I have to get X number of hours of driving before I can take my test. I have to sit through this boring class. I have to make mistakes and feel like a dummy. And, when I was taking driver's ed, you would be in the car with an instructor and two other kids who were also taking driver's ed. So when you would drive, like there'd be two other kids who you probably went to school with watching you make an ass of yourself, you know, becoming this new thing, becoming a driver, creating this new skill or identity for yourself. It's hard and it's uncomfortable and it sucks. And deception is characterized by, you know, that just, it's called deception because you literally feel deceived almost by the universe, where it's like, well, hang on a second. I thought this was going to be great, but it actually sucks. It's like the wool has been pulled from over your eyes and you are seeing now the reality of the situation. And it can kind of feel like a gut punch, right? And this is the time where we kind of struggle and stumble and maybe falter or lag behind or slow down. So, like when I have those sessions with my clients that are upset with themselves because they didn't keep up that breakneck pace that they had when we first started working together, like they're struggling. They are in deception. And deception, we say, is a time when you are consciously incompetent, meaning before you didn't even know what you didn't know. Now you're painfully aware of what you don't know and where you lack competence and where you are still missing the mark and not the person you want to be. And you really haven't integrated this new skill set or whatever. And it is very hard. And the deception is a place where people often will like just give up. That feeling of deception is too strong, and we just kind of go back up to where we were when we started, which is not the new version of ourselves, not having accumulated. So like maybe if I had just like quit driver's ed or didn't keep going with my driving so I didn't get enough hours, or I just decided not to take the test or whatever, I just gave up and I decided, you know what, forget it, I'm just never going to drive again, it's not worth it. That's that deception piece. But if you keep going through deception, if you keep plugging away and just kind of eating that elephant one bite at a time, pretty soon you get to a next stage, which is called transformation. And in transformation, we say that you're consciously competent, meaning now you do have the skills. I've gone through enough driver's ed classes now. I actually can drive. And I know the rules of the road and I've learned this stuff and I've practiced this stuff and I know it. But I have to be very conscious and present the whole time when I'm driving. It's not second nature to me. It's still something that I have to be, on to myself and paying attention and staying alert and remembering the things that might be hard to remember. And, 10 and 2, right? That's transformation. And the reason why it's called transformation is because that is where the real lasting change happens, where you stay in that place and transformation is happening. You are transforming from a person who didn't have the skill into a person who does have that skill. That is where the real change comes. And if we stick with transformation, where we continue to stay conscious with our competency, we continue to do it, and bring that consciousness to it as long as we need to. Pretty soon, we get to the last phase in the cycle of growth, which is called identity. And that's where we say you are unconsciously competent, meaning I don't just drive a car, I'm a driver. I don't just do this thing, I am this thing. I can drive a car and not even really pay attention and still be driving safely and get to where I need to go on time. And sometimes, and I'm sure this has all happened to all of you before, you get to where you were and you don't even really have a conscious memory of like how you got there. You just did it. It's like second nature to you. You don't just do this thing, you are this thing. And that only comes from going through those hard times. And there's so much, the cycle of growth has so much kind of baked into it that we actually revisited a couple times during my time with my clients because there's so many observations we can make about it. For example, the the place in the cycle of growth that I think is really interesting. This is just an interesting observation. The place in the cycle of the growth where you're conscious is in the place where you're struggling, where you're in that deception or transformation part. Those are consciousness, consciously incompetent and then consciously competent. Isn't that fascinating? The place where we want to be, the place where we feel like, okay, I did it, or the place where it's like, okay, I'm good, but I'm going to take on something new right now. Those are the places where we're unconscious. Like we're not actually even doing life in a weird way. And I think that is so important to remember. There's so many ways to look at this and get so much great stuff from it to realize like life is rhythmic. Life is this ebb and flow. We slip from consciousness into unconsciousness. We slip from achievement to struggle. We slide back and forth between these things. And the other thing is that conversation that I have with my clients when they're like, oh, I'm so mad at myself. When I started this program, I was doing all of these things in the workbook and I haven't done anything lately, or I was coming to the group calls every week and I'm not coming right now, or, I was filling out my pre-session assessment. So I was like really plugged in when we met. And then I haven't even filled that out before our last couple of sessions. Like when I see that sign of deception, that sign of like they're in the struggle, am celebrating in my mind. I'm excited about that because what that means is that my client is in the cycle of growth, which means that they are on their way to that transformation and new identity. And I know that the only way to do that transformation and new identity is to go through the struggle of deception and transformation. So if I'm going to be this like sort of helpmate to my client, that requires me to really walk the talk that I need to expect and almost hope for sessions with my client where they are struggling, because the struggle is what creates the outcome that we're looking for. And the last thing I'll say, because this episode's getting a little long, is think about how this applies to your kiddo. Think about what you might see them struggling with and our temptation to rescue them or fix it or almost like blame them sometimes for the fact that they're doing it quote unquote wrong, or they haven't figured this out yet, or that they're struggling or whatever. Like, if you had just done your flashcards like I told you, you wouldn't be struggling in math right now, or whatever it is, right? But if we are able, once again, to look at life as this rhythmic, like almost breath in and out, inhale, exhale, up and down, night and day, light and dark, all of those things. If we are able to look at life as this natural rhythm that is supposed to involve all of that inception, deception, transformation, identity, and then again, inception, deception, transformation, identity, if we are able to see that life is supposed to be like that, we can look at our kids who are floundering or struggling and say, you're doing life. This isn't a problem. It's magic that I'm watching unfold before me. And we can also apply that to ourselves. So I hope that's my sincere wish for you as you're sort of flowing into 2025, that it is an easeful flow and upswell into this next wave instead of this careening, with almost like urgent reactivity into everything that the end of 2024 wasn't. That makes sense. If this stuff is vibing with you, if you are like feeling this, vibration that I'm feeling right now around this year, around approaching our goals, around grace and kindness and compassion towards ourselves and our kids as we do our work of becoming who we are going to be, you and I might be the perfect fit for creating some amazing magic in your life. So set up a free consultation with me. Use that link that you get in the show notes and let's talk about it. I want to hear what your sort of vision, your identity vision that you are in the stage of inception about. I want to hear what that is. What is the vision that you can see enough to feel super, super excited and unconsciously incompetent, just all jazzed up and pumped for? I want to hear what that is. And I want to walk alongside you while you go through deception and transformation and get into that identity place. That is the beauty of coaching. That's what we do all the time as coaches. And it's really sometimes hard to walk that rhythm, to go through those waves alone. And you don't have to. Have a great week, everyone. And I will talk to you again soon. Bye.
The episode is over, but there's more waiting for you. You can grab my free workbook, Getting Kids to Listen the First Time, that walks you through the fundamental principles I teach all of my clients and applies them to this very universal parenting challenge. So if you're sick of repeating yourself all day long or just want to learn more about my style, you'll definitely want to go to bit.ly/kidswholisten. And if you're ready to work with me, let's meet. Set up a free call at bit.ly/Kaplan call, and let's create an action plan that gets you exactly where you want to go. And of course, links to all this goodness are in the show notes. Thanks for joining, and I'll see you next time.